being here today. It's an amazing exhibit. So many people are enjoying it, and I hope you will as well. Today, we have a list, as you probably know, of the 100 children's books of the last 100 years, our view as librarians of what the greatest are, and that includes The Cat in the Hat, Caps for Sale, The Hobbit, Harry Potter, Matilda, and The Phantom Tollbooth. How many people have read all of those? All right, a little work still to go. So everyone can look through this list and check off the ones that they've read and work on the ones that they haven't. We hope that parents and children will use this list. You'll be able to purchase sets of these books through our bookstore, and of course you could do it online, or even better, you can borrow them for free from any of our libraries. And that's great. I want to thank for today Betsy Bird, the supervising librarian, and Jean Lamb, the coordinator of youth collections, for compiling that list and for all their great work, for all the great work by all of my colleagues here at the library. You can also go online and check it out at nypl.org/children's100. So to celebrate our exhibit, to celebrate our ongoing commitment to free books for all of New York's children, for great educational programs, and in fact, just this week we are launching a whole set of new after-school programs that some of you may find really interesting. But to celebrate all that today, we invited two legends of the children's book world, both of whom are on our list, of course, to be with us here today. So Judy Blume's Tales of a Fourth Grade Nothing is on the list. And Eric Carle's The Very Hungry Caterpillar is on the list. So to open our conversation, I'm going to introduce Leonard Marcus, the renowned expert on children's literature. He curated the show downstairs, which, as I say, is amazing and free and open to the public. And he's going to discuss children's books a bit before hosting our panel discussion. Leonard has curated exhibitions on children's books at the Eric Carle Museum, which is up near where I used to live in Western Massachusetts, as well as closer to home, the New School for Social Research, Vassar College Library, the Boston Athenaeum, and many more. He's written many books about children's literatures. He really is the expert, and he's fun. His book reviews have appeared in every issue of Parenting Magazine for 21 years. Please join me in welcoming Leonard Marcus.
Well, good morning. Our first books stir and shape us as few books ever again can. It may be Goodnight Moon, or The Very Hungry Caterpillar, or Tales of a Fourth Grade Nothing, or The Phantom Tollbooth, or Nancy Drew, but with any luck, some book comes along when we're young that makes us want to read it. And from that good beginning can grow a lifelong love of words and pictures and literature and art, in an ever-deepening sense both of ourselves and the world. Why do children's books matter? Well, there's one reason, and here's another. Viewed over time, children's books are the collective memory of our hopes and dreams. They're the message in a bottle that each generation tosses out to the next generation in the hope that it may wash ashore and be read and taken to heart. Sample the children's books of any time and place, and you will soon know what its people most cared about, and above all, what they imagined and feared for the future. It's hardly overstating things to say that children's books are among the truest and most basic cultural expressions that we have. My work as the curator of the ABC of it started out as a glorious scavenger hunt. Patrick Carle, my assistant, and I had the great fun of rummaging through one after another the New York Public Library's incomparable special collections. Our goal was to choose the books and artifacts that best told the story of how books for young people fit into the larger story of the arts, social history, and popular culture. Among our notable finds, the very first copy of Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, the one that its author, Lewis Carroll, gave to the real Alice. The Mother Goose volume that Nathaniel Hawthorne read to his children, with the rhymes X'd out that he and his wife, Sophia, doting, surprisingly modern parents, thought too scary. The toy bear that was A.A. Milne's inspiration for Winnie the Pooh. The oldest known copy of the New England Primer, that no-nonsense lesson book that Puritan parents hoped might propel their children not into Harvard, but heaven. The manuscript of Frances Hodgson Burnett's The Secret Garden. Some of the very earliest Japanese comic books, original illustrations for The Wizard of Oz, and on and on. Exhibitions are storytelling in 3 dimensions, and it's very gratifying to see people of just about every age and description wandering into the gallery and stopping to look and look again at some special book that has caught their eye, snapping pictures, posing for pictures, petting the fur-covered Wild Thing wall, and best of all, reading about the nearly 250 objects on display. Visitors from around the world are connecting palpably with books on view from their homelands: India, China, Japan, Russia, Latin America, Africa, and Europe. People arriving with thoughts of revisiting a personal childhood favorite are leaving having discovered that that book they fondly recall from home did not come from nowhere, but rather that it belongs to a vibrant, many-stranded tradition that reaches back both more than 3 centuries into every corner of the literate world. A wise and rather rumpled old library lion, the poet W.H. Auden, once said, "There are no good books which are only for children." What he meant by this, I think, is that if we as adults still laugh or weep or feel flat out amazed by a book we first read in childhood, we should not be surprised. Children's books are the literature of becoming, and we never stop becoming ourselves. They're the literature of hope, and hope is something that everyone needs. This exhibition is the perfect place to test out Auden's proposition, or just to enjoy the artistry and wonder and wit of books that may seem as simple as ABC, but are really much more than that when you look even a little closer. We're very fortunate this morning to have with us 2 of the best loved and most widely read children's book authors of our time, Carle and Judy Blume. Let's welcome them now. Okay, we're going to have a little bit of a conversation, and then both Eric and Judy, take your time, are going to read from their work. So, because we have 4th and 5th graders here, I thought it would be nice to start by asking both of you to tell us a little bit about what you were like in those days when you were growing up. And did you know yet that you wanted to write stories or make pictures? Judy, would you like to start?
4th grade?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
What was I like? I was, for a while, shy and quiet. That was in the 1st grade and 2nd grade and 3rd grade. And for some reason, then I had a complete change. And I became more outgoing. And I always had stories inside my head, always. But I never told anybody about them, because I thought if I did, they would think I was weird. And so I kept my stories to myself, and I never wrote them down. I never dreamed of writing them down. They were just there for me. I was never bored, because they were always going around inside my head. My husband says I haven't changed at all. I'm still the same. So that's kind of what I was like as a kid.
Yeah. How about you, Eric?
4th grade. I was born in the United States, but when I was 6 years old, my parents, who were immigrants, returned to Germany. So from age 6 to 22, I lived in Germany. Fourth grade, the war broke out. 1939, the war broke out. So, and wars in a strange way are very exciting, especially in the beginning. Later on, they're not exciting anymore. So that's the outstanding thing. I always liked drawing, like you always liked stories. Even before I knew the word artist or art, I told people when they asked me, what are you going to do when you grow up? I'd say, I'll make pictures for people. So I knew that from day one.
So, Eric, E.B. White saw a spider in his barn one day, and then he started writing Charlotte's Web. Did you see a caterpillar?
My background is graphic design. I'm not a writer so much. And I like to, what I call, push paper as far as possible. In other words, it's not just a sheet of paper. You can fold it up. You can cut holes into it. You can cut shapes in it. You can make embossings. There's all ways of making paper richer than it is. So with the caterpillar, I wasn't at all thinking about a caterpillar. I was punching holes into a stack of paper. I was kind of bored. I punched holes in a stack of paper. And then I looked at the holes, and then I did some folding, and then I did some short pages just to make the paper look interesting. And then at one point, looking at the holes, I thought of a caterpillar. I thought of a bookworm first. And then the bookworm became Willie the Worm. And I have a wonderful editor, and she didn't like the worm so much. So we really have to thank my editor, Ann Benedus, because after she said, I don't like Willie the Worm, we went back and forth, what else could we do? And then she said caterpillar, and I said butterfly. So that's the beginning of that book.
Yeah. And Judy, how about you? How do you start a book, and also, how do you know when you're done?
I always start a book, and I tell young people who ask me, where do you start? I finally have figured it out after all these years, because I have to answer that question, and I know now, start on the day something different happens.
Oh.
But the characters live inside my head for a long time before I ever write about them. I think about them for a long time, sometimes for years. I make a lot of notes in a notebook, and I let them grow. I let them stew inside my head. And how do you know when you're done? I pretty much know when I'm starting where I think I'm going to finish. It's the stuff in the middle that I don't know. That's the hard part. Mm-hmm. Like, okay, I'm starting here, and I think I'm taking them here, but what's going to happen in all those pages? That's the surprise for me. Have I ever gotten to the end and not knowing? I mean, getting out of a story is hard. Those of us who read, we know sometimes when we get to the end of a book, it's like, oh, that person didn't know how to get out of it. And so that happens often. Same with television series, you know, you don't know how to get out of it. But I pretty much know when I'm coming, when I know the end. I'll know it when I get there.
And you really like to...
know it when I see it.
You really like to revise your work, don't you?
I'm totally a reviser.
Yeah.
I mean, a first draft. If I died during a first draft of one of my books, that's the end. Nobody would ever have a clue what I was doing. No, I'm second, third, fourth, fifth. I love, that's when it all happens. All the good stuff happens.
Yeah.
That's not like, you know, the teacher says, well, I know you teachers today don't do that because you're very good teachers. But when I was growing up, you know, you would get it back with a red pencil, and then revise it meant copy it again, write it again. That's different than what I'm talking about. That's my best creative process. I must be talking too loud because I hear myself.
I had a teacher who wouldn't let me use an eraser. We had to always start from scratch, just what you're saying. Yeah.
How about crossing out?
Mm-mm. Oh, no. Yeah.
That's very sad.
Yeah. Yeah. So, Eric, tell us about those colored papers that we
colored
have some
papers.
examples of in the gallery that everyone can see.
Yes. I worked in advertising. I was an art director in advertising, and we specialized in pharmaceutical advertising. And each art director has an account, and each year he or she has to come up with a different style. So one year it was big type, next year was small type, next year it was watercolors, next year. So after about 5 years, I remembered collages that I did in art school in Germany. I studied with a wonderful professor, and we made our own colored papers. It was an interesting process. Essentially, you had a pot of red here and a pot of green here, and you start out, you take the first sheet and you paint it red, and then the next one you put a drop of green in the red, and the next sheet you put 2 drops of green in, and so forth and so forth. So you get a beautiful range, and you do that with blue and yellow and so forth and so forth. So I had this problem of coming up for a new art style, and I thought of my art school. I hadn't done them in many, many years, and one was a beautiful red lobster, because some people are allergic to lobsters. And Bill Martin, who wrote Brown Bear, asked me to illustrate his book, Brown Bear, What Do You See? And that changed my life. From then on, I started doing books for children. I had never thought of doing books for children until I was 40 years old.
Which we know is very young, but they may think.
So, Judy, you didn't set out to do this, but you've written a number of books that became controversial. And I wonder what it is that makes some books so loved by children, but not so loved by some of the adults around them. What have you found?
I found that books that are loved by children are often the books that scare adults, that they don't want the kids to read those books. Mm-hmm. Those who would ban books don't come after books that kids don't seem to be enjoying, mm-hmm. which is very interesting. Mm-hmm. They don't even know of the existence of those books until the kids like them.
Yeah. It became a big part of your professional life, though, didn't it? Having to talk about this. Yeah.
Yes. I never dreamed in a million years. I mean, I thought when I started to write This Is America, we don't have censorship or book banning. Little did I know. Mm-hmm. Just because I wanted to write about real kids in the real world, and some people didn't want their kids to read that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Do you find it's getting better or worse, or is it the same as it's been for years? It's
not getting better. Mm-hmm. We just celebrated Banned Books Week. Mm-hmm. You know, it's still there, mm-hmm. a lot of it.
Mm-hmm. So, Eric, your books haven't been controversial in that way, but when you were getting started, some people thought they were so simple that they didn't take them as seriously as you might have liked. How has that changed, and what does it take to be that simple? You know, what's going on that we don't see that makes it that way?
First, I had one book that was controversial too. It was banned for a while.
Which one?
Which one?
All going down.
What's it? Draw Me a Star. And as you know, my style is pretty postery and not very detailed. And in it, I have Adam and Eve. Mm-hmm. And at the end of the book, I say, in it is my grandmother always said, Grie, Gra, Grattenfuß, Gänse laufen barfuß. That's so. So in somewhere in the book I said, my grandmother taught me that verse. Well, one teacher wrote to me, what did she write? A teacher wrote me, she said, your grandmother would be ashamed of you. Okay, go back to your question.
Do you want to tell us a little bit about how you get? I mean, I think of picture books as distilled, not simple. But how do you get to that point where you have a book that just has that one powerful image on each page?
I started out as a poster artist in Germany. I designed posters for the U.S. Information Center. And I have always liked bold shapes. And in art school, I remember my teacher encouraged that. When I did fine lines, he said, don't do it. When I did calligraphy, he said, don't do it. When I did watercolor, he said, don't do it. But when I did things with bold shapes, he encouraged that. So I have always liked posters. And also the poster essentially, or it doesn't always do it, but it should, if you're selling shoes, it should say shoes. There's a shoe there. I know I'm oversimplifying it, but the message has to be immediate. And that's what I feel about my books. The animals, the story, the whatever is in the book is immediate. You don't have to look for anything.
I love that. For years, I begged publishers to do, this is going back a long time, to do a poster art for the covers of children's books. Because I think, people are attracted to that. Let's have...
Yeah.
And now I see it all over,
It's more so,
much
yes,
more,
yes,
much
yes,
more.
yes. I must, at this point, I know my publisher is here. The graphic designers in publishing are deadly afraid of white space. They don't know that white is a color. White is a very important color. I'm not the first one to say that. So I use the uncovered space as a design element.
So I asked Eric about his caterpillar. Judy, what about fudge? Is there a real fudge?
Oh, long ago, there was a real fudge. The idea started with my son, Larry, who was the kind of toddler that Fudge is in the earliest book. Yeah, in Tales of Fourth Grade Nothing. Larry was a lot like Fudge. He wanted to eat his dinner under the table and called himself somebody the cat. Frisky? Who does he call himself? I can't remember now. I've written about so many cats. Well, I think it's Frisky the cat. And my friends would come in and see this little boy eating under the table, with the rest of us were eating at the table, and they would say, he's heading for trouble. You better stop that now. But I'm happy to say he's a grown man, and he eats at the table. He never talks about wanting to be Frisky the cat. But we have a good time reminiscing about that. He never, I don't want to spoil the Tales of Fourth Grade Nothing for you if you don't know, but he never did that.
Oh. Huh.
But somebody did. I read a story in a newspaper about a real toddler who did that. That's where I got the idea.
Oh. Well, this seems like a good time, Judy, for you to read to us from Double Fudge.
Well, here's the thing, okay? I don't really live in New York, so when I went to find a copy last night of Tales of Fourth Grade Nothing, I didn't have one. And the only one that I had was Double Fudge. So this is the first book in a series of 5 books about Peter and his little brother Fudge. Do you guys know Fudge? You do, okay. And this is the last book in the series. So Peter starts out in 4th grade, Fudge is turning 3. In this book, Peter is starting 7th grade, and Fudge is starting 1st grade. So I'm going to read to you a little bit. You stop me, if it goes too long.
Well, it won't.
Okay. This chapter is called The Miser. When my brother Fudge, I'm Peter, I'm reading this as Peter, okay? When my brother Fudge was 5, he discovered money in a big way. Hey, Pete, he said one night as I was getting out of the shower, how much would it cost to buy New York? The city or the state, I asked, as if it were a serious question. Which is bigger? The state, but all the good stuff is in the city. People who don't live in the city might disagree, but I'm a city kind of guy. We live in the city, right? Fudge said. He was sitting on the open toilet seat in his pajamas. You're not doing anything, are you? I asked as I toweled myself dry. What do you mean, Pete? I mean, you're sitting on the toilet and you haven't pulled down your PJs? He swung his feet and started laughing. Don't worry, Pete. Only Tootsie still poops in her pants. Tootsie is our little sister. She'll be 2 in February. Fudge watched as I combed my wet hair. Are you going someplace? He asked. Yeah, to bed. I got into clean boxers and pulled a t-shirt over my head. Then how come you're getting dressed? I'm not getting dressed. Starting tonight, this is what I wear instead of pajamas. And how come you're still up? I can't go to sleep until you tell me, Pete. Tell you what? How much it would cost to buy New York City. Well, the Dutch paid about $24 for it back in the 1600s. $24? His eyes opened wide. That's all? Yeah, it was a real bargain, but don't get your hopes up. That's not what it would cost today, even if it were for sale, which it's not. How do you know, Pete? Believe me, I know. But how? Listen, Fudge, by the time you're 12, there's a lot of stuff you know, and you don't even know how you know it. He repeated my line. There's a lot of stuff you know, and you don't even know how you know it. Then he laughed like crazy. That's a tongue twister, Pete. No, that's just the truth, Fudge.
Thank you. That's great. That's wonderful. And now we're going to have a sort of world premiere. Eric Carle is going to read his brand new, not yet really published, picture book called Friends.
Well, this one I'm going to start in the back a little bit first. When I was 3 years old and lived in Syracuse, New York, we had neighbors. Maybe you cannot see it too well, but this is me at 3, and I'm hugging a girl. She's 3. So not too long ago, I came across this picture again. And based on that picture, the little boy, Eric, little girl, I forget her name, inspired me to do this book. The other inspiration was I am a great admirer of Leo Leone, and we were sort of friends. We were not buddies, but we were friends, had lunch occasionally, a cup of coffee. And his granddaughter, with whom I've become friends, came to me a couple of years ago, and she said she had an unfinished book by her grandfather, Leo, and he couldn't finish it because he was going blind and he was dying. And nothing in the world would I have preferred than to do a book together with Leo Leone. So I worked on it, and it just didn't work out. My idea was going to be about an Eric Carle mouse and a Leo Leone mouse. Yeah. But it just didn't work out. But I still have 2 people, right? 2 friends, so that has remained. And that's how sometimes ideas come up, don't they? Okay. And I dedicated that to my wife. Actually, she didn't like this book, so I dedicated it to her. Then she liked it. Here this is little Eric and little girl. Once there were 2 friends who were always together. They played together, they ran together, they danced together, and they told each other secrets. But one day the boy was all alone. His friend was gone. She had moved far away. I miss her, he said. Wherever she is, I must find her. Then he took a deep breath and counted to 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And jumped into the swift river. The water was cold. Brrr. The river was wide, so it took him a long time to swim across. Now you will notice that for the next pages you will not see the boy. These are sort of abstract paintings. I'm very interested in art, and I would like to teach children about art. So in a camouflaged way, I'm teaching you about art, semi-abstract art, abstract art. When he got to the other side, it was already dark. The stars watched over him as he fell asleep. The next morning, he saw a tall mountain ahead. He started up one side. The path was steep. It was hard work. Finally, he got to the top, and then he slid right down to the other side. Plunk. Take this here part. The boy landed in a broad meadow. It was a hot day. The grass was dewy, damp, and cool. He strolled through it. Then all of a sudden it began to rain. Splish, splash. He had to dash through the falling drops. After a while, the boy fell asleep. And he dreamed he was floating on a cloud. He woke up in a deep forest. Dark shadows danced around him. He rushed out of the woods into a bed of flowers. He gathered a bouquet, and there was his friend. "I have found you," he shouted. "I know you would come," she said. Together they played and ran and danced and told each other stories. And they got married.
All right.
Oh, back of the book.
Well, that was wonderful. And just think, we were the very first people to hear that story in the whole world. So now it's time to thank Eric and Judy for being here. Thank you so much. And I'd like to thank you all for coming too, and to remind you that Eric is having a book signing right after this event downstairs at the bookshop in the library. And that I hope you all go and see the exhibition, the ABC of it. I think you'll enjoy it. Thank you very much.